It's Hude Hour once again, right here on Hude Network. You're welcome back. And, just as the last time you left, we are continuing with advocacy and bringing to light issues within the humanitarian and development space. We take a look at the problems and we talk about solutions. Welcome once again. I am Amadine Obewe.
And I am Joan Eze. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome. Hi, Amadine.
Hello, Joan. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm happy.
You are?
Yeah, of course.
Have you been, should I say, are you hungry? But then, if I say that, I might have to take responsibility.
You know, the last time I asked you, or you asked me, I told you I was fine, and then I asked you, and you told me you were okay. I hope you didn't come back to tell them I bought the world for you.
Well, maybe next time I will, not today. But speaking about food and hunger, we're talking about Salt Awareness today. It's Salt Awareness Week between May 12th and 18th, which happened just a little while back, a few days ago. And we're taking a look at, that week of awareness and breaking down the issues, talking about solutions to reduce salt consumption in the populace as a whole. Now, it's Salt Awareness Week, like I said, and health experts are once again raising the alarm over the world's addiction to sodium, with cardiovascular diseases claiming millions of lives annually. Reducing salt intake has become one of the most urgent and cost-effective public health goals. But how can government and food industries balance public demand, cultural habits, and economic interest while cutting back on sodium? And what exactly are the health implications of salt intake?
Salt is essential in small amounts, but most people are consuming far more than they need, often without realizing it. From processed foods to traditional seasonings, sodium finds its way into nearly every meal. That's why organizations like the WHO are urging countries to step up with regulations, food reformulations, and public awareness campaigns. Now, the big question is, will these interventions stick?
Now, in this episode of Hude Hour, we explore how excessive salt intake is putting pressure on public health systems, what the science says about sodium's impact, and which countries are leading the path in the reduction strategies. But first, let's take a look at our headlines for today. WHO pushes for salt substitutes to curb heart disease. In other news, we have Japan's salt reduction strategy shows major economic gains. Well, we'll take a break now. When we return, we'll delve straight into it. Don't go anywhere. Now, according to the World Health Organization, the average adult consumes over 4,300 milligrams of sodium daily. That is more than double the recommended limit of 2,000 mg. This contributes to nearly 1.89 million deaths each year, mainly due to high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease.
Reducing sodium is not just a health issue, it's an economic one. The World Health Organization, WHO, estimates that for every $1 invested in sodium reduction, there is a $12 return in health cost savings.
Now we'll go on a break, and when we return, we'll bring you global updates on salt consumption and strategies to curb it. Now, the World Health Organization, the WHO, has issued new guidance urging the global population to replace regular table salt with lower sodium alternatives, containing potassium chloride to reduce the risk of heart disease. In a statement posted on its official X account, WHO highlighted that excessive sodium intake is responsible for 1.9 million deaths annually, primarily due to conditions like high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. The agency recommends limiting sodium consumption to less than 2 grams per day, equivalent to under 1 teaspoon of salt, and encourages increased intake of potassium-rich foods such as beans, peas, nuts, and leafy green vegetables to support heart health. While endorsing salt substitutes as a preventive measure, the WHO cautioned that these should only be used in environments with adequate healthcare access, as elevated potassium levels can pose risk for people with kidney problems. The recommendations target the general adult population, but exclude pregnant women, children, and individuals with kidney impairments. This initiative forms part of WHO's campaign to tackle poor dietary habits, which are linked to approximately 8 million deaths globally each year. But those numbers are quite alarming, and I think there's a lot to unpack here, but we'll leave more of the professional aspects to our medical practitioner coming in soon. Yeah. But as for me, I think the key part of this is noting that reducing salt consumption is seen as one of the most economically friendly, costly way to enhance public health. Because what you're doing is you're killing it before it starts. So just by having little lifestyle changes, you are saving yourself so much fun, so much stress. If you continue that way, and you should end up with the complications that come, with this. So I think that's the most important part for me, the economic aspect, knowing that taking this seriously is probably not just going to save you money, it's going to leave you with more to spend, invest, and all of that.
Oh, well, I think it's a very, very crucial thing that we need to talk about. And for us to be observing the Salt Awareness Week, that is very, very important. And people consume salt and they don't know that they go out of the line, because in everybody's mind, they need their food to be very sweet and all that. But there's this particular saying that too much of everything is not good. So as a human being, I think the WHO has actually estimated that you don't have to go past this particular gram so that it doesn't lead to the cardiovascular disease and all. So I think at this point, people should be very, very intentional. We need to keep the taste aside now and focus on the health, and also, just like you mentioned, the economic part of it, because that particular money that you're to use to spend on your health and, to buy drugs and take care of yourself and start solving one particular disease or the other, cost by something that you could just cut down on. I know it's not really going to be that easy, but it's something that is going to be a gradual process and involves intentionality. All right, let's move to the next news item we have. Now, there's a new study published in Hypertension Research highlights the long-term health and economic benefits of Japan's decades-long efforts to reduce salt intake. Now, researchers estimate that the country's salt reduction policies since the 1950s have prevented nearly 416,000 deaths. Now, 298,000 among men and 118,000 among women by curbing cardiovascular disease, that's a CVD, linked to excessive sodium consumption. Now, with 29% of Japan's population now aged 65 or older, CVD accounts for 19% of national healthcare spending, rising to 24% among seniors. Salt intake remains a key contributor, and reducing consumption is seen as a cost-effective measure to prevent disease and control healthcare costs. Japan has lowered its average daily salt intake from 13.9 grams in 1995 to 10.1 grams in 2019. But this still exceeds the World Health Organization's recommended limit of 5 grams per day. Now, unlike Western nations where processed foods dominate sodium intake, Japan's dietary salt primarily comes from traditional condiments like soy sauce, miso, and salted fish, which together account for 66% of intake. Efforts to promote low sodium products have gained traction. Since 2013, the Japanese Society of Hypertension, JSH, has certified 108 reduced sodium items, helping prevent an estimated 9,678 tons of salt from entering diets. However, researchers note that broader adoption is needed. Japan's national guidelines aim to reduce daily salt intake to 7 grams by 2032 under the Health Japan 21 initiative. Additionally, policies launched in 2022 promote food reformulation and industry cooperation, aligning with WHO's recommended best buy interventions like front of pack labeling and public food procurement policies. Japan currently ranks level 3 on WHO's 2024 sodium scorecard, behind countries like Spain and Mexico that enforce stricter food industry regulations. Modeling in the study projects that achieving Japan's salt reduction goals could reduce CVD cases by 1 to 3% and cut healthcare costs by up to 2% over the next decade. Now, the findings reinforce the potential of sustained multisectoral sodium reduction strategies to improve population health while easing economic pressures. Well, I've not really been to Japan, but we know that Japan's kind of meals are salty and very, very much related with salt and all. And from what I just mentioned now, the soy sauce, the salt fish and all, the miso. So these particular meals is what Japan, and apart from Japan, other countries as well that have salty food intake. So it makes them consume a large quantity of salt. And now Japan has actually brought out policies, to cut this whole thing down. And I'm happy to see that it started from 1995 and it dropped from 13% down to 10 in 2019, even though it's not yet up to the WHO's standard of 5 gram. But I'm very sure that they'll keep looking forward to reducing it daily, by day, and of course other countries should also learn from it, because we need to end this whole disease and focus our money to something more important and also saving our economy.
Indeed. And Japan, has a more of an aging population now. I think about 1 in 10 people are senior citizens or older. So it goes to mind, or it goes to show how much more care is needed in these places so that all can be protected. I know during periods like COVID-19 and all of that, you find that people who are more predisposed to illness are the ones more vulnerable. And so when you consume so much salt, it builds up, and you have a number of diseases that it has been linked to, which we'll hear more about, I'm sure, after the break. But for now, we will take a break. And when we return, we'll be furthering the conversation with a guest. He is a medical doctor, speaking about Dr. Kelechi Opara. He joins us now in just a moment to do justice to this issue. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Every day,
Amazing stories of hope and tenacity unfold across the globe. On Hude Hour, we dive into these inspiring tales and discuss the vital work being done in the humanitarian and development space. Humanity has never faced a shortage of challenges, yet we rise stronger through teamwork and determination. Though these remedies are often underreported, on Hude Hour, we advocate sustainable solutions. We bring you the latest and most impactful news on how lives are being changed. We engage with young change makers and experts who provide valuable insights into relief efforts and the challenges faced by local communities through a global perspective. Join us every Wednesday by 8 a.m. on Hude Network's YouTube channel as we embark on this journey of positive change.
Hey everyone, let's face it, our world today experiences numerous challenges. And guess what? Our community isn't off the hook either. Most of the world issues are either not talked about enough or never talked about at all. But here on Timeline, we've got you covered. We dive deep into issues that affect us every day, leaving behind footprints of wisdom, knowledge, and solutions. Think of it like a roadmap that keeps you on the track for success. So buckle up, because in this new season of Timeline, we're taking another trip through the past, the present, and navigate into a more promising future. Again, we're talking solutions, people, and let's make one thing clear. This is not your average blah, blah, blah convo. This is real talk with a side of inspiration and a sprinkle of wow. I never thought about it like that. I'm your host on this impactful ride. Together, we'll tackle the tough stuff, laugh a little, and find ourselves on the path to positive change. So what are you waiting for? Season 2 of Timeline will be loaded. Let's get started. Hop in, and let's drive straight into the heart of issues shaping our world. Let's go. Oh, one more thing. Hit that subscribe button and let's take this ride together.
Welcome back. This is still Hude Hour right here on Hude Network. We've been talking about the Salt Awareness Week, and we'll be joined now by a guest. He's a medical doctor, Dr. Kelechi Opara, to speak on this issue. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you again.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's start with why salt intake is a health concern in the first place, because you'll find that even an average person has the perception that they shouldn't take so much salt. But if you should ask them why, they can't really pinpoint why.
Okay. First of all, salt is very important. We use salt for cooking. Most everybody salt cook. And it's really important for our body in little quantity for nerve function and muscle function as well, and muscle contraction and all that. And it's even very important for fluid balance in our body. It regulates the fluid movement in our body. So it's very essential to life. But the thing about the salt consumption is when it's in excess, overconsumption, is that the problem that we have. And that increases the risk of hypertension, which is a very concerning thing, because along the line, hypertension would now lead to cardiovascular risks, disorders and all that, which is a very huge problem in the society. So that is a very, very serious condition. So,
all right.
Okay, so you just mentioned that it leads to hypertension.
yes.
So apart from that, what exactly does the excess of salt intake do to our body over time?
Okay. So as I mentioned, hypertension is a major one.
Yeah.
Basically, salt, the components of salt that we're worried about is sodium that you mentioned earlier. Salt is sodium chloride. So that sodium, when it enters into the body, what it does is that it tends to draw water to itself. So there's a lot of water drawing water to itself. And when it does that, there's increased fluid overload. You get increased fluid in the body, and that increased fluid in the body will cause pressure on our arteries and vessels. That's the hypertension we're talking about. Then over time, the arteries begin to narrow and block. And then over time, it now leads to those cardiovascular disorders. So aside the hypertension, one can have what is known as left ventricular hypertrophy. So you're straining the heart over time because the heart tends to put more effort to try to pump blood because of the pressure. And over time, it begins to, increase in size and then cause the ventricular hypertrophy. Then aside that, another issue that we have with it is stroke. So basically, when it blocks arteries, especially arteries that go to the brain, it can lead to what is known as stroke. So that's another thing you need to worry about. And then fluid retention, because that excess salt draws, as I mentioned, it draws water to itself. So it causes fluid retention, and fluid retention can be in several areas of our body. It can be down in our legs, our face, with someone having swollen face. So it's known as edema. So edema are the legs, the extremities, the legs and the hands, and then the face as well. So there are these several concerns that are worrying from excess salt intake. Over a very long period of time. So it's like an accumulative effect of this excess salt intake.
Okay,
go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to really understand the drawing of water to itself. You talked about sodium. Whenever you take in salt, how does that really happen? Is it that it's shifting the water out from somewhere, or how does it really happen?
There's this principle in many secondary school science class known as osmosis diffusion. Exactly. So salt is like a concentrated solution when it's in water. So when it's concentrated, there's a principle of moving from a higher concentration to a lower concentration to try to dilute the whole thing. So if it's concentrated at one end, water begins to flow from another different end into the concentrated parts to try to dilute it and cause an equilibrium. So that's how it tends to draw water to itself. So basically, if it's in our bloodstream, if salt's in our bloodstream, it tends to draw a lot of fluid around from the tissues and everything into the arteries. So causing that artery to have a high pressured wall. And then over time, it begins to block and then narrow as well.
All right. Can we get an idea of real-time measurements that will help people understand? People know there's salt in food, but there's a way they use their own regular layman reasoning. For instance, if you want to cook, you put a portion in your hand and you feel like, okay, this is enough. This is not too much. I mean, this whole food, the salt is like this, so it's not a problem. So is there a way we can break it down for people so they can have an idea of what the limits should be or what it should be in terms of real life settings?
There's actually a misconception, because people think maybe it's from the salt that they put in their food, but there's something known as hidden salt. Because basically, the salt is just 10 to 20% of excess salt that we get from these table salts that we use in our food. Most of the salts are actually found hidden in other materials, like other food substance, like processed food, food you get from restaurants, even snacks have this hidden salt. You might not taste salt in your mouth, but then there's a huge amount, like 70 to 80% of salt is actually in these snacks and processed food. So that's the misconception I wanted to address. And that's it.
Okay, that being said, are there any kinds of, other than the ones you've mentioned, there's one that comes to mind, perhaps you can debunk it or verify it.
Okay.
Noodles.
Yes.
We hear almost every other day. I don't want to mention any brand names, so let's just call it noodles. If you eat too much of it, and then we know some populations, like student populations, even some workplaces where they have access to ready-made noodles and all of that, they eat a lot of this. So is there a concern in that area?
Yes. I didn't mention that, but all those seasonings to have salt, those are where you also get hidden salt. Those restaurant foods, they have seasons in it to get, and that can contain excess salt as well. There's an amount that WHO expects that we limit in salt, where 2 grams, less than 2 grams of salt Yeah,
Just
basically,
like
which is
a
like
little
1 tablespoon,
Yeah.
exactly. Less than 1 tablespoon of salt that we should consume a day.
Mm.
So usually we tend to exceed that amount. We tend to use up to like 9 to 12 grams in a day. And most of them, as I mentioned earlier on, are contained in all these hidden salt foods, like those seasonings, those condiments we use, sauces, those restaurant foods, those canned foods as well. You know, these canned beans, canned corn, you get. So you get those hidden salts then, and people tend to feel like maybe it's spicing the food and making it look nice, not knowing that they are even increasing their salt intake.
Mm.
So we shouldn't be focused on just the table salt we use
Mm.
to cook. So those other ones contain high amount of salt.
Okay, so we should understand that the presence, taking away the table salt is not enough.
It's not enough, just
Okay.
10-20%.
Okay.
You know,
Exactly.
it reminds me of a real life situation where I know someone who cooks with only seasoning cubes. You know, it's common to see people cooking with seasoning cube
Bouillon
and salt,
Salt.
but they believe not putting salt has, you know, really reduced the salt intake. Would that have an effect?
It wouldn't have an effect. Salt is salt. Even salt is in seasoning cubes as well. Yeah. So even putting seasoning cube, but I said that those ones are not even the ones that we should even be really worried about. But even at that, we should still reduce our salt intake in terms of those seasoning cubes we use and the normal table salt that we use as well.
Okay, so Dr. Kelechi, I want to come into your profession now very well.
Okay.
You've really come in contact with patients. So what are those symptoms that you see in your patient to say that, okay, this person is actually having excess salt?
Okay,
Intake.
you can't really measure that per se. It's just basically now the risks when you begin to have those risks. I mentioned hypertension is a very huge risk factor when you are taking excessive salt intake, and that hypertension has those symptoms. By the time and the thing about hypertension is that it's a silent killer. You wouldn't know that one has a raised blood pressure as a result of consumption of salt over a long period of time until they begin to show those symptoms. When they've already shown those symptoms, it has been there for a very long time. It's a chronic health issue we need to address. So basically, those symptoms of hypertension is person begins to have headaches, easy fatigability, you begin to have chest pain. By the time it's now getting to a cardiovascular problem, you begin to have chest pain, shortness of breath. So those are all those symptoms. And then another thing is that fluid retention, because I mentioned earlier on how salt draws water to itself. So you get to see fluid retention in certain areas of our body, like those distal ends, proximal ends, proximities, basically our legs, our hands, and even our faces as well. So that
Are these
those
symptoms
symptoms.
permanent? This particular one,
No, they are not. No.
No, the reason I say this is there are persons who I know have that thing. Perhaps when they enter,
The menopause.
tight spaces. Then they get cramped, and then when they come out, it seems as though all the blood has
Seizures,
rushed to their feet, and it's now
No,
time.
that doesn't count.
That's
like a different pathology on its own. It's not related to hypertension.
All right. Okay, that being said, there's all this buzz about alternatives that obviously salt is sodium chloride.
Yes.
And then people say use potassium chloride and then other sorts of recommendations. There's one in particular, Himalayan salts. What do you make of all these alternatives? And at the end of the day, do they get the desired effect?
No, they don't. Himalayan salt, there's even rock salts, seafood salts. They are still salts. It's just a chemical compound. It's NaCl, that's sodium chloride. So whether it's the Himalayan salt or the rocky salts, they are all salts. Just that the only difference between the actual table salt and the Himalayan salts that they're talking about is it just contains some minerals that are insignificant, small amounts like magnesium and iron, extra minerals, but it still contains a reasonable amount of salt you get, so it doesn't affect anything. So that's it. There are other alternatives to salt. You can use, there are certain other spices I can use instead. Onions, garlic, lemon, or those lemon juice flavors, they can still help flavor your food. I'm not saying that we shouldn't use salt, it's just that we should reduce the quantity that we use. So with a tablespoon now, as an example now, you can know how many you use in a day. Okay, how we ration a tablespoon, we divide it by 3. I know if you're taking 3 square away, you know what I mean? So we should reduce the amount of salt that we take in essence. Not saying that we shouldn't take salt at all, but then you can have other extra things you put to make your food, spice your food more, like what I mentioned, garlic, onions, ginger, lemon juice. To get those things can also help.
So just a quick one. What do you advise patients or people in terms of processed foods? We saw the other day, this is what we've seen in other countries as well. NAFDAC, the federal government released a salt strategy or salt guide, something like thereabouts. And part of it involves, these companies ensuring that they indicate the salt content on their food or packages.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think that helps the average person, or how would it help the average person?
First of all, it's all about those policies first, making those policies, ensuring that those food manufacturers are educated on the risk of, overconsumption of salt, so they can make those adjustments on how they package their food and all that. Then it's very important to actually put those food labeling, as you mentioned, and make it boldly written. You get those, the level of sodium. And then it's very important to also educate the masses to get on the quantity that we require to get.
Exactly. That's why I asked the question, if they will be able to interpret what they see.
Yeah, so education is very important, making an awareness, telling people about it, just like we're doing now in the media. So it's very important. And even taking it to schools as well is very important, because aside those children buy a lot of snacks. And as I mentioned, snacks too contains these hidden salts. Yeah, exactly. So it's very important to go to schools and also educate them too on the benefits of reducing their salt intake, telling them that you can also get those salt quantities in their snacks and what they eat. So you need to know that you shouldn't take snacks at all, but reduce your intake of snacks, because they tend to take it a lot.
Okay, still speaking about children, are there any side effects to this?
Yes, children are even more at risk because they are young. First off, being young and you're already taking excessive salt, you're increasing your risk. That's later on in life, cardiovascular risks. So they tend to now have hypertension much earlier. And over time, that chronic hypertension can lead to cardiovascular problems, heart problems later in life. Yes, that. And then it can also affect their kidneys way earlier as well, because, this excess salt, the kidney is responsible for regulating fluid balance. I know that they tend to even regulate our salt intake and output when we urinate, And so basically, excess salt can put excessive strain on the kidneys and then decrease the kidneys function. I know that in children, their kidneys are, trying to develop. So when you now have that fault, you can now cause chronic kidney disease along the line. And then also in children, when you take salt, the taste buds tend to adapt to the salt intake, and they are now used to taking salty food, and they are unaware how salty it is. So, and then over time, they will take excess, and then it causes dehydration. Remember, I mentioned that it tends to draw water to self, so they tend to be more thirsty, and then they now rely on sugary drinks to actually quench their thirsts and all that. So over time, now it can lead to other comorbid conditions, diabetes, even obesity from taking those things. So those are very significant effects, especially in children. So it's very important to actually educate children on the risk of taking
and their
excessive
parents as
salt.
well.
And parents, of course.
Yeah, that's a very funny cycle there.
Yeah.
You are taking too much salt, it's getting you thirsty, and then you are going to sugary drinks.
Sugary drinks to quench
It's a crazy one.
And the thing is that they are unaware that it's actually very salty because taste buds are adjusting to that. Exactly.
Yeah, I really wanted to mention that. The example I gave before, where the lady who doesn't cook with salt, or pardon me, she cooked without salt, and for her and her family, their food is perfectly okay. But for people who take a whole lot of salt, something is missing here. This is not how it should be.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think we'll just round up with this now. You've already talked about things that people can do. What do you make of the strategies that are being put in place to ensure from the WHO to reduce salt intake by about 30%? Do you think there's enough progress being made, and how much further do you think we need to go? And I'll just quickly add that we've seen the movement around sugar to the point of taxation being increased and all of that. Do you think that's also a path to go, or what we have currently is fair enough?
What we have currently is actually not fair enough. There are several countries that has put more efforts into making this happen, but even at that, they are still not at that level of 30% document the WHO recommend. Countries like the United Kingdom, the UK, they've made progress in regulations of those food manufacturing industries, and I think they've gotten up to 14% reduction in their salt intake. And then other countries that have even made more effort, like Finland. Finland has gotten up to 40% reduction. Then South Africa is actually the 2016. They're actually the first African country that has made efforts towards reduction in salt intake and all that through their regulatory bodies, policy making, and even awareness education. So we need to make those efforts. We need to first, create those policies on reduction. That's also telling those food manufacturers on the importance of reducing the salt intake. Then we need to make that food labeling very, very important to ensure that the label clearly stating the quantity of salt that is in their processed food, canned foods, and all that, so that the public, people that are consuming, can actually see the amount of salt that they are taking. And educational awareness is very important. We mentioned to parents and even school students as well. So on the importance of reducing their salt intake and the effects of overconsumption as well. And then that's basically.
All right. So I just have to sneak in one last question, because I know a lot of people might be interested in this. We've talked about a lot of preventive care here. Someone who has already found themselves in that situation, they already have hypertension, high blood pressure. Does reduction in salt at that point have an effect? Or is it, you've already crossed that line?
It actually has an effect. So basically, someone that has a mild to moderate hypertension, a reduction in salt can, actually reduce their dependence on medications. Can even reduce blood pressure to 4 to 8 millimeter mercury. That's the measurement for blood pressure. Can reduce it, and then even reduce their dependence on medications. Then someone that is already having organ failure as a result, that's cardiovascular disease, that it would slow the progress of the disease. Not like it completely reverses it though, but when there's an organ damage, you have to be managing. But then it slows the progression to become worsening. So it can actually have an effect if you reduce your salt intake.
It's not too late.
People, it's not too late.
All right.
Yes,
thank you so much, Dr. Kelechi. This has been very enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. That's how we round off this segment of the program. We've been speaking to an expert, a medical practitioner, a doctor who knows way more than we would. And this awareness, I do hope it has reached you well, and you've taken notes on some of the things you can do to still make a difference as we are still rounding off, or we are, looking back on the Salt Awareness Week. We'll go on a break now. When we return, we'll delve into our verified voices. Don't go anywhere.
Every day, amazing stories of hope and tenacity unfold across the globe. On Hude Hour, we dive into these inspiring tales and discuss the vital work being done in the humanitarian and development space. Humanity has never faced a shortage of challenges, yet we rise stronger through teamwork and determination. Though these remedies are often underreported, on Hude Hour, we advocate sustainable solutions. We bring you the latest and most impactful news on how lives are being changed. We engage with young change makers and experts who provide valuable insights into relief efforts and the challenges faced by local communities through a global perspective. Join us every Wednesday by 8 a.m. on Hude Network's YouTube channel as we embark on this journey of positive change.
Hey everyone, let's face it, our world today experiences numerous challenges. And guess what? Our community isn't off the hook either. Most of the world issues are either not talked about enough or never talked about at all. But here on Timeline, we've got you covered. We dive deep into issues that affect us every day, leaving behind footprints of wisdom, knowledge, and solutions. Think of it like a roadmap that keeps you on the track for success. So buckle up, because in this new season of Timeline, we're taking another trip through the past, the present, and navigate into a more promising future. Again, we're talking solutions, people, and let's make one thing clear. This is not your average blah 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 convo. This is real talk with a side of inspiration and a sprinkle of wow. I never thought about it like that. I'm your host on this impactful ride. Together, we'll tackle the tough stuff, laugh a little, and find ourselves on the path to positive change. So what are you waiting for? Season 2 of Timeline will be loaded. Let's get started. Hop in and let's drive straight into the heart of issues shaping our world. Let's go. Oh, one more thing. Hit that subscribe button and let's take this ride together.
Welcome back. It's still Hude Hour right here on Hude Network. And now we are on our segment of Verified Voices, where we take a look at what some of the key stakeholders are saying on this matter. Paul Oladipupo joins us now. Paul, how's it going over there?
Well, we're trying to ensure that we don't take too much of salt. That's how it's going right here.
Okay.
It's Salt Awareness Week, which was just concluded last week, and we're still on that discussion to look for ways that we ensure that our salt intake is not much. Let's take a look at our verified voices and see what they're saying. Today, our very first tweet is from the WHO, where they say that reduce your salt intake. Here is how. First off, use salt sparingly and also cut back on salt sauces and also condiments. Avoid snacks that are high in salt. Consider using lower sodium salt substitute for adults with no kidney problems. If unsure, check a health professional before switching. Also, it goes on to talk about how to reduce your sodium intake. The first is to use less table salt for cooking and when eating. And if you do season with salt, consider using low sodium salt substitutes. And also, let's take the second tweet as well quickly from also WHO. This is at the Southeast Asia. It says eating more than one teaspoon of salt per day could increase your risk of a heart attack. Look after your health and hashtag beat NCD. That is non-communicable disease. Also, it goes on to say that eating more than 1 tablespoon of salt per day could increase your risk of heart attack. And also, do not sacrifice your health to a high salt diet. I mean, this just sums up to all of the things that we are saying that we've been discussing since morning, basically. Because you see, the thing with salt is that it's quite tricky in the sense that you might. Some people are of the opinion that salt is the enemy and all of that, but I think that's a very big misconception in the real sense. But the real thing here is that we should try to cut back on our salt intake. We should ensure that we don't go beyond the guidelines of salt that are meant to use, basically. So I think that's the main thing that we should actually point out here. Salt is good for your health, yes, but too much of salt in your body system could cause a lot of things. There's high blood pressure, stroke, headaches, fatigues, a number of them. You could just go on your phone now and go to Google and just Google quickly the the consequences of having too much salt, too much sodium, basically. And I think that's also the main thing to also point out, that it's actually sodium that is causing all of these things. And also, although there are other options like sea salt, but regardless, even with sea salt here, there's still salt inside sea salt. Rather, there's still sodium inside sea salt. And so, what we are trying to look for is ways to reduce sodium in all of our diets, and I think that's the main thing. And also, when you get snacks here, it's also important that you try your best. Try to read through all of those nutritional facts that are usually with all of those snacks. They would help a lot to understand how much of sodium you are taking into your system, and so you don't go above the limits just as recommended by WHO, food organizations, and all of that, basically. And I think with all of this, I feel we'll be on the right path to this. And also, it's also important that for adults, is I think about 2 grams or thereabouts. For children, it has to be less than that, because it's going to be nice to expose children at that young age. I think another thing again I would also point out is the fact that there are some of us that even after our food must have been cooked, we had table salt again to our food before eating, saying that the salt is not enough. That again is not advisable. And remember that we're trying to reduce how we take salt into our systems.
Indeed. And I think for me, when we read those tweets there, it can be a bit funny when it says, take only 1 tablespoon a day. People, it seems as though it's literal, like take only 1.
Exactly.
But,
yes.
That's not how it really works. And I think that at the end of the day, you should do your part to protect yourself with what you can control. Because when you get to, add processed meals and all of that, especially the ones that are not following compliance and being open with all of the salt contents, particularly small businesses, who don't have proper packaging, they just, put things in regular, things that are not so regulated. You can't tell how much is there. So the ones that you do have control over, you can begin there, and then let's hope that policy and regulations cover for the rest.
Exactly. Well, it's not just even use of salt. Also, we should also talk about bouillon cubes as well, because that's another issue as well. Also, in most bouillon cube has sodium, and so it's also important to try and cut back on bouillon cubes as well, the use of bouillon cubes. In case you don't know what bouillon cubes are, they are Maggi, as commonly referred to across the world, basically. Let's quickly look at this last tweet, and then we'll discuss on this extensively. This is from a Proko doctor. He's a popular doctor here in Nigeria that usually shares hints on health matters. He says, if you love your art, frying plantain with salt should be minimized. If you are hypertensive, it's even double wahala. Excess salt can increase your blood pressure. This one is not even an argument. I'm not saying you should not eat dodo or that's fried plantain. I'm saying use your head. And I think this is a very interesting one. And I guess I will actually share my own personal story with frying plantain. Actually, I'm a very big fan of fried plantain. I love frying plantain. And in fact, any kind of plantain, basically, fried, boiled, or even roasted, I'm there. Trust me. But one of the things that I noted because I'm a fan of plantain, and also I try all of these things, is to actually fry plantain without salt. And I'll tell you for a fact that if your plantain is ripe, you actually don't need salt. And even if you want to add salt to your plantain, you just need a little, more like a pinch to your plantain before frying it. But I've been literally frying my plantain without salt for close to 7 or 9 years now. And I'll tell you for a fact that it's very sweet, especially when the plantain is actually ripe.
I don't know you're such a good cook. I was thinking that particular angle should come from me, but if it's coming from you, I think it's a good one there. There's something I really want to point out, and I think in the second tweet, and it's saying that do not eat high salt at the risk of your health.
Yes.
We're talking about you're trying to jeopardize your own, don't sacrifice your health to a high salt diet. Yeah. So you can't say that because a particular meal is not sweet, you have to now jeopardize your
salt,
own
yes.
health, because that particular money you're supposed to save to help your life and all that, you'll be channeling it to the hospital, and you'll be going to take care of yourself and all that, buying drugs and all. So that particular money, you can channel it to other things like lemon, just like our doctor said. You can buy the ginger, the garlic, lemon juice, use it to make your meals, and it will still come out very, very good. I know this is not really, it's going to be a very, very serious step to retract, but it's very, very important. And of course, frying plantain, that plantain is like one of it,
Exactly.
but other meals as well.
I was happy the good doctor made well to indicate that. I'm not saying don't eat dodo, which is fried plantain. So that was a good one, so that we don't have civil war. But away from that, I think that Dr. Opara actually broke it down where he said that taste buds can evolve. So I think when we're suggesting new avenues, people shouldn't feel that it's going to take immediately. But when you do it after a while, you realize that at the end of the day, you are getting the same level of satisfaction, so to speak, from lesser salt intake than you were when you were having much more. So I think people can just give it a little bit of time when you're trying these changes, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. I think you should also mention that government are also trying to make their own effort as well in terms of trying to reduce sodium intake of people, basically. And one of the things they are doing is to tax salt. And I think that's actually a very nice one. And most governments now have guidelines as regards how to reduce salt. Although there are still talks on how to look for a way to look for another salt to replace basically sodium in our common salt that we used to cook at home. But at the moment here, it's not yet clarified. But I do understand that there are some manufacturers of all of these processed food that actually use potassium chlorate instead of the sodium chlorate that we are familiar with. But all of these things are still in works, and hopefully we'll get to a point where we don't want to discuss on things like that. And please remember that salt is not your enemy, but it's also important that you eat salt with moderation, and that's very important. My name remains Paul Oladkuko. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. I got carried away there while I was listening to you. It's been an interesting one. Thanks so much for doing it again. Bye for now. Now, that's how we round off the program for today. Do join us next time right here on Hude Hour on Wednesdays by 8 a.m. while we bring to you more updates and more discussions and advocacy within the humanitarian and development space. Bye for now. I am Amadine Ubewe.
And I am Joanese. Thank you so much for joining us. Your health is very important. Take care.